Scoobs, welcome in. How you doing?
What's up, buddy?
Scoobs, are you at least 18 and do you believe in some kind of
Yeah, I'm
God?
20 years old, 2004.
Cool. And what God do you believe in?
I just say I'm a deist. I'm just gonna deliver an argument for God existing.
Okay, so are you actually a deist or is that just a God you want to argue for today?
What do you mean actually a deist?
I mean, I don't meet many deists in real life. Typically, when I get people up here and they want to run a deistic argument, it's typically because the God they really believe in doesn't have a good argument, which is fine. Like if you're like a Christian or a Muslim and you're like, I don't really have an argument for those gods, but I do have an argument for the deist God. That's fine. I'm not going to force you to give me an argument for your specific God.
Hmm.
But like if I
I'm
ask
not
you,
Christian. No, if that's the question you're asking me. I,
well,
I used to be quite a Christian, but I'm a little bit agnostic.
okay, so you're agnostic, cool. So what's the argument for a deistic God?
Yeah, okay, so do you know who Thomas Aquinas is?
Yep.
All right, do you know the argument for motion?
Yep.
Yeah, so premise one, things are in motion. Premise two, nothing can move or like actualize itself. So I can kind of explain this in way of example. A thing cannot both be
We know
potential
the
and
we know the
actual.
prime mover argument.
Okay, yeah. So P and then P3 is just going to be infinite regress of actualization per se. Causes is just not coherent, and then conclusion is going to be therefore a first unmoved mover must exist. Well, what are the contentions with the view?
I think there's two contentions. One is I don't think that a prime mover needs to be some sort of a sentient entity. It could just be a naturalistic phenomenon. Number two,
Such as
well, you don't have to know what it is. Like you can't describe God, right?
that's just going to be well the way I describe God is just going to be being of pure act. So which is going to be the first mover.
Is it sentient?
Sentient as in it has first person subjective experiences.
Yeah. Because if it's not
Uh,
sentient, you're talking about a naturalistic phenomenon.
I don't see how why that'd be an entailment, but I don't know if God is the type of thing that has first person subjective experiences. I don't know about
So
that.
if it's not a mind, then it's not God. It's just nature.
I don't see how that would follow.
Yeah, yeah, because in order to be God, it's typically an agent. It has to have thinking capacity.
Thinking capacity. I don't know if that'd be if that you could say that and then say that God's omniscient, omnipotent, all that.
Buddy, I don't know how to tell this to you, and I hope this isn't your first time hearing this, but you're an atheist.
Uh, that doesn't really answer the question. What? Why is it? What? Okay. Why is there an entailment that God is necessarily the type of being that has first person subjective experiences?
Because that's entailed in the definition of God. The definition of God is a thinking, acting agent that has some kind of power that is supernatural. But if you're describing something that isn't intelligent, it's not thinking, it's not conscious, it's just a force of some nature, we don't call that God. You're talking about something that has a different definition.
Yeah, the way I would just describe God as a being of pure acts. If he has like first person subjective experiences, I'm not too sure about that.
What was this? Was this creation an accident?
Was no, no.
So it was intentional.
Uh, yeah, I would
So
assume
the
so.
God has intentions.
Right. If it has intentions, it has to be a thinking agent.
There's no logical contradiction in something having intent and not having first person subjective experiences.
Do rocks have intent?
Do rocks have intention? Obviously not.
Is there any non-thinking entity that has intent?
It's logically possible.
Can you name one?
It's just logically possible. I don't need to give you an
I
example.
actually don't think it's logically possible because the ability to think, as far as we know, requires agency.
Which law of logic did it break?
Didn't break any law of logic. I mean, you're just
So it's,
describing two
it's
things
logically
that
possible.
disagree with each other, right? So it's just definitionally speaking, like the ability to act, like the ability to make decisions or to have intention requires thinking.
Well, you just agreed with me that it's logically possible not to think and still act. That's
I
the point I'm making.
I don't agree with that at all, right? So I think when you talk about
Sure.
acting, like if you're saying that like a boulder rolling down a hill is acting, that's not what I would call it. Acting is when you make a decision and then you do something
Okay,
about that mental
let's just
decision.
run through this again. Is it logically possible for a being not to have first-person subjective experiences but act with intention?
No,
No.
Which law of logic is it breaking?
it doesn't break a law of logic. It breaks
So-
the laws
so
of
then it's
how
logically
definitions
possible.
work. So you
You're saying a
you
law
keep
of logic
using
is
you keep
broken?
using words wrong.
You
In
can't be wrong
order
in a definition,
in
first
order
of all. Second of
in
all,
order to act, you have to be acting on what? What are you acting on?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure.
Maybe
You're not
for
sure where
humor
thoughts
and
come from.
desires. Yeah, the mind. But like I said,
The
there's
mind.
no
Okay, is
logical.
God a mind? Does he have a mind?
I'm agnostic on that. I don't know.
All
I don't
right.
know if
Sounds like you
God's the
don't really
type of
have
thing that
a
has a mind.
good argument.
You granted the
So
argument.
I didn't grant the argument. So
All
what
right,
it sounds.
the law is the law of non-contradiction.
There you go.
What-
You're trying to apply two contradictory properties to the same thing.
Yeah, how is that a contradiction?
He just told you.
I can't help you, bud.
Yeah, you're
Listen,
just saying
like-
I broke the law of non-contradiction, but you won't elaborate. So the claim was,
Yeah,
Is
you're
it
talking about
logically- just
it
hold on.
doesn't have to be
So-
a thinking agent, but then it has intent.
okay, so the question was, is it logically possible for a being not to be sentient, and then still be able to act?
Right, but we're talking about like a definition problem, right? To be sentient is the
Uh-huh.
thing that allows you to act.
The thing that allows you to act is to be
That-
sentient?
That's what action is. Action is when you decide to do something and then you do it. In order to make a decision, you must have the ability to make decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure, but I don't see how it's like it's a logical necessity for you to like have to be sentient to make decisions.
Thinking
I don't
thinking
get that.
requires decisions make thinking a necessity. Like you have to be able to think to make decisions. If
Sure,
you're not
but it's
if you're
also
not
logically.
if you're not thinking,
also
if you're not actually making decisions, if you're not actually thinking, then you're just describing like a naturalistic law of the universe, like how a tree bends towards the light. It didn't think to do that. It just did it because that's the way nature behaves,
The
right?
point,
So
the
if
point that
you're
I'm making,
hold on, Scoobs. If the thing you believe in doesn't think, right, then that means it doesn't make decisions. And if it doesn't make decisions, then it's just not God. You're just
so again,
describing you're just describing a naturalistic phenomenon. You're an atheist and you don't actually know it yet. The other
just to
the
be
other-
clear,
the other problem with your argument, which we're never going to get to if you get tied up on this point that you don't understand. The other problem with your argument is that
let me finish it, and then we can.
you didn't start yet. You can't finish it. The other problem with your argument is that I don't believe there was ever a start to anything. Like the prime mover argument fails also because what we know from science is it appears that there's an infinite future and an infinite past, right? So in order for me to believe that there needs to be a prime mover, I would need a reason to believe that there was once there was once a period or something, you know, there was nothing and then something came
A
from
state,
nothing.
yeah.
A state where there was nothing.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to address the first point. The first claim that I made, that there is no logical contradiction for a being to be not sentient but still act. Right? There's no logical contradiction. Secondly,
No,
you're
there
very
is.
What is-
confused
what is
on
that?
what
It's
the-
just
the
a
prime mover
factual.
argument.
It's just a factual contradiction, because
Yeah, like say-
in order
saying it
to
for the fifth
Which
time.
law of logic is it
in
breaking?
order to act, you are thinking, you are making decisions
Necessarily in all possible worlds, is this violating a law of logic?
Again, violating the law of logic is not the determining factor of whether or not something is true or whether or not it is the case.
Sure, but that the claim that I'm making is that it's logically possible for God to not be sentient yet still act.
Then it wouldn't be
Also, I
God.
don't see how we had. I don't see how
Then it-
I'd have like
Then it
epistemic
wouldn't
access
be
to
God,
either.
Scoobs. It wouldn't be God. The definition of God demands that it's a
Your
thinking,
definition,
a
not mine.
thinking. Well, listen, you can make up your own definitions, but we're talking about the actual definition of God, not your made-up definition of God. Now, if you believe in
Definitions
a
aren't
God,
objective.
if you believe in a God that doesn't think and it doesn't make decisions, then you're just an atheist and it's time to get over it. Now, if you believe in a God that thinks and makes decisions and like has a mind,
Actually,
will,
I have
and
no problem defending the Christian worldview.
no, you don't. So if you believe in a God that thinks and makes decisions and like acts on his ability to feel and to perceive things, that's a God. You don't believe in a God. It sounds like you're just up here trolling, which is why now you're wanting to defend the Christian worldview, even though you lied earlier and said you weren't a Christian, you were agnostic. So it
Yeah,
sounds
but clearly you're not.
sounds to me like you're a child and you need to grow up and put a shirt on. Come back when you're more serious.